Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie Allison. I'm one of the partners at Napton Solicitors, and I'm the head of real estate and our Cumbria operation out of our Kendal hub. I'm delighted to share with you today our panelists and attendees in this recording. We have Minette Batters, who is the President of the NFU, David Hall, who is the Northwest Regional Director of the NFU, and Gordon Whitford from HSBC. What I'd like to do is ask each of you to give us a brief overview as to what you're doing at the moment and the current issues you're working on. And then we've got some questions that we're going to pose to the floor, and we'll discuss those over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So Minette, if I could ask you to give us a brief introduction to yourself in terms of what you're seeing at the moment and what's keeping you busy. Then we'll move on to David, and then we'll move on to Gordon.
Well, look, thanks so much, and it's great to be with you today. I mean, for me at the moment, it seems all-consuming with Brexit. Effectively, we've got the agricultural bill that is in the final stages. I mean, this is landmark legislation, the most important legislation since 1947, and it will shape our farming futures for years, for decades to come. So getting it right is absolutely essential. I think the key focus for us has been making sure that trade effectively works, that we maintain our high standards here. We don't import food that is produced to lower standards, ultimately standards that would in many cases be illegal for our farmers to produce to here. And if we get the trade aspect right, I think everything else, really is exciting, because we get the chance to shape the future domestic policy. But this situation with standards has been a long road that we have been on, and this year in May and June we set about having a food standards petition. We've created a very powerful coalition of all farming organisations, NGOs and consumer groups, added to which we've had the nation's favourite chefs, Jamie Oliver, Jimmy Doherty, Delia Smith, Prue Leaf, and many others who've really joined the rallying cry, effectively saying, do not undermine our farmers. And we saw over 1 million people sign that food standards petition in under 2 weeks. And I hope that gives our farmers a real vote of confidence that the British public is really backing them. And added to which, we've been working with OnePoll Research now for quite a long time, since 2012, in fact, and monitoring effectively the nation's view of us as British farmers. And we've seen a sort of gradual rise in popularity. Some years it stays pretty static. But this year, on all markers that were surveyed, we saw a big substantial rise, and particularly around the question asked on food security. So on the back of COVID, effectively, did people feel that farmers and growers should be producing more food here? And we saw nearly 80% of people surveyed saying, yes, absolutely, we need to be producing much more of our food in this country. So I think that, combined with the petition with 1 million people in such a short time, one of the largest petitions ever, and of course, out of that 1 million people, 500,000 chose to be active supporters of the NFU, so active supporters on our Facebook page, social media outlets of backing British farming. And we saw then 80,000 decide to email their MP, which was unprecedented. I have to say, equally unpopular, but we had to make our voice heard, and that is how we've chosen to do it. And I think farmers should take great comfort in the fact that this nation is really backing their corner.
And David, on a more localised Northwest, what's your view in relation to what Minette's just cited?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. As Minette mentioned, the petition and the work that's been done by members and also the general public that got behind the food standards establishment of the Commission. So as we said, the agricultural bill goes back to the Commons on Monday, and we're already starting to engage with our MPs to get their support for the amendments coming forward. And Neil Hudson, the MP from Penrith and the Board, has already put on his Twitter feed, "I will vote for the amendment, don't email me." So basically, know the support that's been come forward. As Minette said, we may have made ourselves unpopular, but it showed the strength of feeling that has been there from farmers and from the community the way they're looking for that again. So we see it as a key piece of legislation that we need to get right for farmers. Real practical things that we're doing on a bigger level is working with the Cumbria LEP and also the Lancashire LEP for looking at things that can be done to support and things in relation to the economy bouncing back. We see that the farmers have a key role to be able to do that. The move in relation to people buying local food, the move, we have members that are direct and producer retailers on milk that have seen unprecedented demand for their products. Local butchers, red meat sales up 15%. So real positivity within the market and a real demand for local food, which we need to be able to retain, which is, again, it's really, really positive. I'm working with the LEP to see if we can encourage more public procurement and get more more British produce on the plates of people across the board. So some strategic stuff that we're doing, but also then big issues around West Lancashire in relation to flooding. So the issues of engaging with the Environment Agency, United Utilities, and farmers losing thousands of pounds worth of crop because of flooding issues. Then starting to be managing land maybe in different ways due to issues around climate change. The environment is really key. So a range of things that we are doing on the ground. Some of the real practical things, the issues that are affecting farmers in those what we refer to as a day job, but then also the big issues for us in the region that bring to life locally the work that Minette's doing and the Nationals are doing at Westminster. We can then play that out locally with our members. So the specific issues coming in around flooding maybe in West Lancashire, rural crime, big issue in Cumbria, County Lines Initiative, working with the police to increase levels of policing, but also encouraging farmers to be more, a little bit more careful and cautious in the way that they secure equipment as well. So very much from both ends, really, Jamie, and that's the positive work that's being done and the real benefits of what.
Thank you, David. And Gordon, given, and I had to reread this earlier, given you're on your 39th year at HSBC and very much on the ground in our area, what sort of challenges are you seeing that you're supporting the agricultural community with at the moment?
Well, firstly, we've been supporting them with the cash requirements. Some sectors of agriculture were clearly hit harder with the pandemic than others. So there was a clear demand for cash for some businesses, and still is, to continue to support them with the cash flow requirements over the next 12 months. We're also seeing significant expansion in businesses, looking at the opportunity that they foresee going forward. So we've been funding businesses building up their existing commodity production and business model, but also looking at diversification income streams and looking for funding to potentially replace what they're going to lose under the single farm payment to maximise the assets that they've got on farm. And sort of the next thing we've been trying to do is upskill our management team in understanding the challenges that the environmental changes will have on agricultural sectors going forward. So it's understanding what we can do to help and assist, other than just funding, but try and get customers to understand the impact of changes that are going to coming to them in the way that they farm and what legislation will bring to them.
Minette, you've had a very busy week this week with government and the opposition. Could you just give us a bit of a top line summary on the 3 key objectives for the NFU, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, I mean it's very hard to sort of break it down into 3 areas, but if I had to pick 3, I'd say that there are 3 vital planks for us at the moment. One is a good trading outcome, one is access to a competent and reliable workforce, and the third is an agricultural policy that effectively does what it says on the tin. And as I said in my opening remarks, everything effectively is shaped by trade. We have no idea, beginning of October, doing this, what our trading relationship will be with the EU, our closest trading partner, 500 million consumers directly on our doorstep, and we still don't know the answer to that trading outcome. And we've always said that a no deal is absolutely disastrous for our industry, and we stand by that, and it needs to be a good deal. We don't want to see a a thin deal. The economic interests of both sides really need to see a good trading relationship going forward. There are things that will come out of that. You know, if we do leave with a no deal, we will absolutely need to maintain the global tariff. If we lower the tariff wall here, our farmers and growers are subject to the high tariff wall. And ultimately, if you lower the tariff wall to the EU, you lower it to the rest of the world as well. So there are a lot of situations that could arise, all dependent on what is negotiated. And at the moment, we're all in the position that we don't know what that will be. But access to a competent, reliable workforce, you know, for growers in this part of the country, they really do need to know urgently what a global seasonal agricultural worker scheme is going to look like. We've been asking for clarity for a very long time, and everybody will know and recognise this has become, sadly, a very, very political issue. So clarity on that, and you know, focusing on the future of a policy. I can come on to it in a bit, but you know, we've produced a white paper, we've co-designed it with other farming organisations as to what the entry point to ELMS should look like for a sustainable food and farming scheme. So those are the three big ticket items that I would pick out, that I hope we have a very, very solid policy position on now.
Thank you. And David, you touched on this before, and Gordon picked up on this in terms of people diversifying and maximising what the current position is in the market. But what opportunities do you think the pandemic has positively presented to the agricultural community?
The understanding, in a way, from the general public, that I think there is a real shift in relation to their understanding of, you know, where food comes from. There's nothing more, I suppose, wakens the mind than the empty shelves that we saw under COVID, and the way how fragile our supply chains are. So I think, as we said, I have a friend that has a butcher's shop in Cheshire. He saw his trade nearly doubled within 2 or 3 weeks. So it's how we can get some of those people to stick. As we said, we have direct retailers doing milk that were turning away orders because they couldn't fulfil more people. So people were turning to local shopping. Some of those people may go back to mainstream retail, but other people will stick. But then, as we've seen now with the purchase of Asda and the change in ownership in Asda, their commitment to British beef, again, really, really positive. And other retailers will follow. They will come under public pressure because they follow the consumer. Sometimes we think it's cynical, but why have Asda done it? It's good business sense in what they're looking to do. So we see that the farmers can continue to produce good quality produce. But I also see, and very much support what Gordon was saying, is that farmers are continuing to look at diversification. Farmers looking to add value to the product and move a little bit further down the supply chain, and looking to manage some of that volatility themselves by nearly taking that volatility out by that they've got it under control themselves. I think we're seeing that move. And again, that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the LEPs, is encourage them to make funds available to support and incentivise farmers to do this. And that then generally needs the co-financing from blended organisations as well. But I think that appreciation of where food has come from, farmers are looking to step up and do that. And I think, again, within the region, real mix of products that we produce from the West Lancashire and fresh produce. We said the horticultural sector hit very hard with COVID. Our chaps doing ornamentals, getting ready for Mother's Day, got down overnight. Some real pressure on those guys financially, up to the beef and sheep producers up in the hills. And the sector that's currently challenged with the changing COVID and lockdown is our turkey producers that were getting ready. They ordered their turkeys pre-COVID around, I think, the first or second week in March. They needed to order turkeys for Christmas. Then on the 18th, we had the pandemic. But very much though, Jamie, I think the farmers moving closer to the consumer, but also the consumers moving closer to the farmers as well. That's where we see something that we can capitalise on. But I also think the areas in relation to Brexit, well, is how can we capture a bigger market share of some of our export or a global market, and how can we produce products that we can export? How can we work with our processors, incentivise the processors to sell brand Britain around the world and be able to do that and compete as well? So I think we've got to be in every market. Do I see the farmers moving close to consumers? Do, but also we've got to look at positives in relation to Brexit and say, right, how can we encourage most farmers? adopt food producers in a way. We produce the primary materials, high quality materials, to work with our processors, and they then turn into products that the consumer want to buy. And how can we get those exported as well? So there will be challenges in relation to Brexit. Minette's mentioned around support payments and the changes that are coming. That is a real concern. We can come on to that. But I do think there are positive opportunities if the supply chain works together to grasp that at all levels, through to commodity products, through to direct retailers and going direct to market themselves. But yeah, challenging, but we've got to see the opportunities.
Thank you. Minette, in your view then, with all this in mind, what will fundamentally improve the UK's ability to achieve sustainable farming prosperity and meet those international environmental commitments as well?
Again, and sorry to sound like a broken record, but that is all going to be shaped by the trading outcome of what is achieved. I don't think we can underestimate, if we get trade wrong, what the impact will be. But let's presume we're glass half full here and we get trade right. We feel there's enormous opportunity with effectively a bespoke policy that works for the UK. And I'm going to say the UK, recognising that we obviously have a devolved way of working, because we've got to have commonality between the four nations. We've got to, wherever possible, operate as one country. And the last thing we'd want to see is any distortion through a market distortion through a future policy that effectively pitched one against the other. So commonality is going to be important, but we felt very strongly as a union that we needed to show real leadership here, and we really needed to bring to life what ELMS could look like for farmers. And I've worked closely with colleagues across other farming organisations, and indeed our Vice President, Tom Bradshaw, has led the work internally. And we've developed a white paper proposal for government on a sustainable food and farming scheme that is very much a points-based approach, very much wanting to create a safe space for farmers to base their businesses on and climb ladders wherever they might want to go, whether it's producing carbon neutral food by 2040, whether they choose that they want to farm the environment. They get onto that platform and can build from there. And the other important thing to say, and we felt very strongly about, was that we had to get away from the income forgone model and go to a points-based system. I had a conversation with Waitrose about it this morning. We're trying to get all the retailers to sign up and say that they really think that this is a great way forwards and a really good policy, because the whole of the supply chain is really wanting to make sure that future supply is there, that we actually have a policy that really works for the business of British farming. And I think too often many conversations are around, we want to do X, Y, and Z on biodiversity or the environment. We can't do any of this unless we get the business landscape right. Every single farming business has a sort of economic reality as to whether it is going to be successful or not. Indeed, that economic reality will drive what they can be investing in environmental and biodiversity delivery. So the point I guess we've made all along is you've got to have this symbiotic relationship between food production and environmental delivery. And I think that is key to success. You can't have one at the expense of the other. And too many conversations are effectively seemingly about an either or. You either are talking about rewilding or you're talking about food production. And we're saying we've got to do environmental delivery, but we've got to do it in harmony with food production. And that's where I think we have an opportunity, not only at home to shape a very different future, but globally as well. And we host next year the COP26, the most important round of climate change discussions to date. And we feel it's a real opportunity to lay out a sort of global blueprint, if you like, of what sustainable food production, circular economies can achieve. And our aspiration to achieve net zero by 2040, I think that really allows us a sort of position on the world stage, if you like, with the policies in place. I talk to many other countries who say, well, we're just on the receiving end, we're just being taxed on this issue. We've been very, very clear that we want to have our farmers as the solution in all of this. We're both a source of emissions and a sink. So I think that makes it a very exciting time to make sure that farmers have ownership and have ownership of the value of carbon sequestration and producing carbon neutral food as well.
Gordon, what's your view on that? What are you seeing?
Well, at the end of the day, the farmers are still waiting to see what's expected of them, because there's no clear guidelines at the moment. They're just waiting for the information. I suppose we do need a reliable carbon calculator that everybody's going to use. There seems to be a variety of ways of calculating emissions without any real substance as well to carbon sequestration and capture by grassland and woodland that Minette mentioned. So there needs to be one method of calculating carbon capture and carbon emissions so that every farmer can work to the same model and be able to get the advice then to be able to put the models into practice to be able to reduce emissions on farm. You know, the banks will be funding the technology required in some of these cases. All the banks are heading in the same direction of wanting to be carbon neutral as quickly as possible and supporting their customers to achieve that. So, you know, banks will be allocating funding for this specific requirement that, you know, it needs to be there. Farmers need to be more professional in how they monitor that farm and achieve them standards, and they need support and guidance on how to do that. And you know, as a management team, we're trying to gain that knowledge ourselves to pass on to farmers and our customers. And, you know, we're building up ourselves what needs to be done. But when the guidelines come out, hopefully we'll be able then to formalise a plan that will help all. And I'm sure everybody will be striving for that goal.
Turning to you, David, given your role in creating links with the LEPs, what level of support are you seeing from organisations like the LEPs to help drive innovation, to look after the farming community once the agricultural bill goes through? Do you find it supportive? Is it different? Is it innovative?
It's quite interesting, Jamie, in the approach taken by the two LEPs in North, which is Lancashire and Cumbria. We have strong relationships with. We've been working closely with Cumbria LEP for a number of years, since Joe Lappin's appointment and prior to that as well. They recognise themselves as a rural county. We have a rural subgroup of the LEP, which we are part of. And only this morning I was on a call with the Cumbria Local Nature Partnership, which really, again, in discussions of what's the role of the Local Nature Partnership. And really, I think it's, as Minette said, is a lot of the time it's one or the other. And actually, as you guys should be working together, it's not an economic growth at all costs, and it can't be nature recovery at all costs. We've got to work together to actually find that sweet spot to be able to generate benefit there. So we see that is really positive. Cumbria has been identified to do a local nature recovery strategy. One of the two areas in the northwest Manchester, Greater Manchester, another area. And again, we see that really as a real opportunity for Cumbria, but also for the farming community, because we are part of the solution. People may think that we're part of the problem, but in reality, we have the land, we can sequestrate carbon, and we are a huge store of carbon. So again, it's really positive when the farmers are keen to engage. With Lancashire, we've worked with the LEP for a number of years, really trying to lobby to get Lancashire to recognise itself as a rural county. Probably 70 to 80% of Lancashire being rural, but the main area being around big business. And we're really pleased to say now that Lancashire has identified food and farming as a priority sector. So we've worked hard to do that. I now chair a food and farming subgroup with the LEP. And we have support there from a range of businesses, from Morrison's, part of that group, Booths, Nigel's part of that group from Booths. So yeah, we're really pleased, a range of representative farmers and businesses part of that group with us. So we are keen, and I think really it is around developing project ideas to go forward in relation to green recovery, and also if the development then of the shared prosperity fund. So we need to be ready, or the LEP do, with projects that can go forward to be able to deliver on the green agenda. Farmers can play a real part of that and be positive. I think a lot are quite excited in relation to working towards achieving net zero. It's also good business sense in relation to, in effect, producing more from less. How can we drive our productivity, which will also drive our net zero ambitions as well. Yeah, some real good opportunities. I suppose our role is ensuring with the LEPs and government funding locally that those funding sources are there, that those incentives are there to be able to move the economy in a particular way, and the farmers have the opportunity to access that.
Before we move on to a question that's been submitted from someone from the horticultural sector here in Lancashire. I just want to check in with you, Minette, on a particular view. And given your the company you've kept this week with government and opposition, do you feel that the mood music is very much aligned to the core objectives that the NFU is striving to execute? How do you feel about what you're hearing versus what the NFU wants to achieve?
Look, I was really impressed that both Keir Starmer and Sir Ed Davey were incredibly interested in our desire to be able to achieve net zero by 2040. And Keir Starmer was asking me if I saw global opportunity here. And, I said, yes, very much so. We host the most important round of climate change discussions. So I think we're pressing a very open door with opposition leaders. My frustration to date with the Conservatives is that it is being, to David's point just now, it's very much talking about sort of nature or food production. And what we are saying is, look, we've got to do it together. And actually sustainable farming practice, is nature friendly farming, but there is more to it than just talking about it. This is a point I made to Keir Starmer. You've got to have, this is big change. It's big change for farmers, it's big change for consumers, and you've got to have policies that deliver those changes. It doesn't just happen. And to date, our environmental schemes have been stewardship schemes on the perimeters of our fields, effectively. And what we are saying, this is about the core business. You've got to focus on the core business. You've got to focus on the soils. You've got to focus on getting into the field. And he seemed very engaged with that. And of course, Ed Davey has a background with climate change. He, in the coalition government, was a minister in Bays. So he was very interested to know the opportunities on natural products, effectively. I talked to him about the plight of the wool industry. I said, we've halved the value of wool right across the world. We've had a terrible time here as farmers with massive devaluation. And I said, here you have the most fantastic natural product, and we are just wasting it. And the opportunities with public sector buildings for using it for insulation. And, his face just lit up. He was really, really interested. So we pride ourselves on being an apolitical organisation. And it's really important for me to be having those conversations with those leaders, because I think that relationship is critical to the future. You never know who you're going to be working with next, and you must make sure you have equal balance with all parties. I have, of course, yet to meet the Prime Minister, so he is last on the list to meet me, but hopefully that will happen shortly.
Excellent, thank you. If I can turn now to the question that's been submitted from a pak choi grower in the county. They grow roughly around 10 million heads of pak choi per year under glass. They supply supermarkets, catering firms and local markets. And their biggest challenge at the moment is, and you touched on this before, Minette, is getting reliable staff to harvest and plant. They find that historically that European countries provide good quality, hardworking, industrious employees. And in the past years, UK individuals, they say, have tried working in their business, but they failed to last. The question to the NFU, they write, is what is being done to ensure that there will be enough staff next year in the farming and horticultural industry? And secondly, what advice or suggestions can you give to a company like theirs to ensure that they are adequately staffed?
Look, I think for growers at the moment, that the number one priority for them, their number one challenge, risk to their business, is not having access to a competent, reliable workforce. And to say it is frustrating for the length of time we have been talking to government about this is an understatement. Both the Horticultural Board Chairman, Ali Kappa, and Tom Bradshaw, who leads on Labour for us, have been relentless in their drive to make sure that we get the right outcome. But it is incredibly political at the moment. And of course, Home Office is now very focused on what they refer to as Armageddon unemployment. They're looking at potentially 2 million people being unemployed next year, and potentially that going up to 4 or 5 million. That takes us back in some areas to the sort of era of the 80s, when we had in some cases 20% unemployment in places. So we've got to do more, I think, to empower a UK workforce to work with the sort of Pick for Britain initiative. And it isn't going to happen overnight. And this is the point I keep on making to government. You know, growers are up, always have been up for sourcing UK workers, but ultimately they haven't wanted to do it. And government policies have driven people away actually from working in the field. So it is going to take time, and hence why we need certainty on what a global seasonal worker scheme is going to look like. Obviously, we had the pilot for this year. That has been, I think, phenomenally successful, although of course with COVID, a lot of people couldn't get here, so we didn't fulfill the whole quota. But we are pushing at every level of government to make sure we get clarity on what the new SOARS scheme will look like. We've also been engaging with retail, and I'm hopeful that all the retailers will be writing to the Home Office. If that doesn't work, we will all write as a whole industry to number 10 and try and get some clarity that way. But I'd say to any grower out there, please email your MP, really make the case for your business as to why you need access to the competent, reliable workforce and need the answer on the SOARS scheme as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. David, have you got any closing comments for us?
I'd echo Minette's comments in relation to labour. It's not only across the horticultural sector, but other areas as well that are also impacted around it. And I think it is looking to all areas in relation to risk. I think across all businesses, as Minette said, around horticultural businesses, it is a big issue in relation to labour. I think for our livestock farmers, the concern in relation to what could happen to our future in relation to the introduction of elms, the loss of BPS, what are the impacts on your business there, staffing and issues across all businesses, but looking around business resilience and look to manage the things that you have got the control of, nearly rather than worrying about the things you haven't got control of. So really trying to build some resilience into your business yourself. And I think the other thing, we're really keen on engaging with the next generation of farmers, looking at succession, ensuring that the businesses are there for the future, and a number of things that we can do. Basically, for people to really look at the businesses, be aware of what's happening, where the costs are, where their income streams come from, where some of the risks are, and what can they do. We will and do fight for the big ticket items. Minette said we can do the things. We're fighting hard in relation to making sure that elms is fit for farmers. We're fighting hard for access to labour, but there are things that farmers can do in their businesses as well to make sure that they are resilient going forward. We will support them in doing some of those things on a farm level, again through what we say is the day job. We are in for could be challenging times, but as we said, glass half full. I think there'll be some good opportunities for us to grasp as well.
Thanks, David. And Gordon, finally, David just touched on the word succession, and that's something that we as a business have been educating our client base about in terms of putting those structures in place for the sustained longevity of farm businesses. What sort of conversations are you having, and do you think the awareness is high enough for the importance of planning for succession in the farming community?
I don't think a lot of people think of succession until they're significantly older. A lot of partnerships lack partnership agreements or an understanding of how the assets would pass down to the next generation. So formally documenting them requirements for the family with the appropriate advisors is a really sensible thing to do as quickly as possible. And in order that everybody gets what they're expecting out of it. But I think more importantly, it's sitting around a table and having the discussion in the first place to ensure everybody understands what they're going to get or what they want out of a farming business at the end of the day. Succession is important. We're starting to see different business models for those who lack succession, who are going down the contract farming, share farming route as a means of staying in farming and embracing new entrants coming into the business, which is a delight to see, because they tend to be good professional farmers who are adopting and embracing the new ideas, new technologies, and generating the returns to support both the elderly landlords and themselves in setting themselves up in farming if they can't afford it for themselves. So there's new models out there to help, but succession is clearly important in avoiding some of the issues that we've probably both seen over the past 20 years when things come to a head.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, I think that wraps us up for the afternoon, Minette. We'll let you get on to the next thing. Thank you very much for your time. We know it's extremely precious. Thank you to David, and thank you, Gordon, for the contributions. It's been really worthwhile and quite enlightening. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.